Hello, and welcome to the SMU Video Archive series. In this series, we interview members of the community who can provide insight into SMU's history, especially from the perspective of their time at the university. I'm Carter Murphy, and today we have with us Lorn Howard, whom I may say is one of the faculty members who has as much respect as anyone in this group during the nearly 40 years I've been associated with it. Lorn, why don't we begin at the beginning? And it seems to me you came to SMU in 1959, over 40 years ago. What brought you to SMU, and what did you expect to find, and what did you find when you came?
This is such a nice occasion, Carter. I can't imagine enjoying being interviewed by anyone more than Carter Murphy. We've had a great time together here, and I think the interview today is, in my feeling, is especially interesting in the light of a play that I saw in the Margot Jones Theater last night, having some words such as bees in their own honey drown. Well, to go back, I thought that SMU had the possibilities of being a fine university, a good university in the real sense. Before I came here, my little family had moved around quite a bit in getting to the place where I was satisfied with my education, living at, I think, something like 8 or 9 places since getting it started. So we were looking for a place, a university setting, where we thought people were committed to making it a fine university, and where there were structures already in place in the university that could make this possible. I came down here and interviewed all the usual people that you might expect to interview. There was a department head, some of the faculty, the dean, of course.
Hemphill Hosford was our genial provost.
Oh yes, very much so.
Distinguished man.
Yes, and I think I even talked to Willis Tate. I feel sure I did for a while. And I was impressed that everyone was committed to doing the best that he or she could do toward making it a university worthy of the name.
You came, Lorn, from Michigan State, is that not correct? Where you
Yes.
had finished your doctorate and done some teaching.
Yes, that's true. I was teaching there for 4 years. Before that, at the University of Illinois, where I was involved in a graduate program that, or a research program that we can talk about a little bit later. And I not only interviewed here, I went over to General Dynamics in Fort Worth and interviewed over there. And after doing that, there was no question where I was going to go, so I went back and got the family together, and we came down here, and it was quite a change.
Who was the dean of the School of Engineering, as it was called then?
Earl Flath.
Mm-hmm.
And he had come here a good many years ago. What was it at the time? About 1925, and got the co-op program in engineering underway. This had its birth, I think, either at Case in Cleveland or or at Georgia Tech. And I think maybe it was Georgia Tech. I had even thought about going to those two places, but I did not.
And was that that co-op program, was that a source of strength in the School of Engineering?
Very much so. I think it was one that the local industry was happy to support, did actively support it. We had a good program going when I came here. I thought that sort of thing was a very appropriate thing for a School of Engineering to be doing. As I say, I had thought about going to a place like that myself, and it was a strength here. I knew that there were problems here. Some we'll probably talk about more as we go on, but
let's identify those problems if we can as we go by.
Well, the graduate program in engineering was minimal. The money to support programs that were already here was very grossly inadequate. For example, in the Department of Electrical Engineering, we had a budget of $2,500 a year for equipment, for maintenance, for any kind of electronic supplies and the like.
In a program that's materials oriented, where one has to have
Yes.
equipment and...
That's right.
What was the outlook for funding?
Well, good question. That's one of the things that made me decide I should try to come here and be a part of the group. At that time, let's see, this is 59. The real, some of the things that I think did us in, if I can use that expression, had not become apparent. I was told that at that time that the graduate program, the Graduate Research Center, note the difference here, the Graduate Research Center was to be established at SMU, and that there was plenty of money from industry to get this underway. To enhance the graduate program particularly in engineering, but also this was to be in mathematics and physics and chemistry, but particularly in engineering, because this is what local industry was very interested in. Now, it sounded very good, and I emphasize, because there's a difference here that developed right away between an entity generated at SMU, and I don't know who was the primary supporter of that development, probably Claude Albrin, very possibly.
Perhaps.
Seeing it as a graduate
Evan Griffiths had been brought to the university at about that time.
A little bit later. I don't think, he was not here when I came. But I was starting to say there's a difference between that Graduate Research Center, and it was incorporated, and Graduate Research Center of the Southwest, which is the entity that really turned off the faculty. And the whole idea, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here in a way, but the thing that was attractive that we're going to have support for research at a level I thought that would be approaching the experiences that I had had at the University of Illinois ahead of time, and then more recently at Michigan State. Before I had been here a year, I found out that that was not going to be. What had happened was that one of the people involved, and I suspect brought in directly to this operation by Eric Johnson of TI, because he was on the board of directors there. It was Lloyd Berkner. And all of a sudden, the university found that it was not going to be the Graduate Research Center incorporated here, but that we were to be a part of a sizable entity involving a large number of universities in the Southwest into a consortium type system known as the Graduate Research Center of the Southwest.
Now, Lloyd Berkner was brought to head up that Graduate Research Center of the Southwest then.
That's what I believe. It was his idea to go to that form of operation. And you can imagine the chagrin of the faculty to learn that they were not supposed to have their graduate students do research at this institution or the others, A&M, Texas, Lubbock, Rice, but they were supposed to send their graduate students to the Graduate Research Center of the Southwest for research in a highly equipped laboratory. We later learned was to be an operation run by, for, and with Texas Instruments. And that was quite a shock, and nobody was going to buy it. I was not going to send graduate students there, and none of my colleagues was. And so things began to fall apart for us.
And so this led to the great tension between Eric Johnson and his group, Berkner, and SMU.
Very much so. What do we know down at the faculty level? Often we don't know really what's going on. And in this case, what the university had committed itself to was involvement in the Graduate Research Center here. And we were all happy with that because we thought money would flow in for graduate students, for research equipment, for time, for faculty. And that simply wasn't going to happen. What we finally got out of it, and this is all we got out of it, was the Science Information Center building into which Lloyd Berkner moved his embryonic Graduate Research Center of the Southwest. So the whole floor, the whole third floor of the Science Information Center became operating area for that unit.
Now that partial marriage, Lorn, only lasted a year or two then, didn't it?
Very well, yes. They were up there, I think, maybe a year, but the disillusion amongst the faculty, engineering and science faculty in general, was enormous. When they moved out, the lab I had been able to start, in spite of all of this, and as a part of the $2,500, what did we get? A year, a small lab in one of the buildings behind Caruth Hall, in the packaging laboratory. Small operation there.
How did this end up, this flirtation with the Texas Instruments Group and Berkner? We know that they finally left this campus and became the seed of what is now the University of Texas at Dallas, of course.
What I found in the literature on this subject, and that is to say, the newspaper reports, and actually in some university publications, not in a very great extent there, was that this Graduate Research Center of the Southwest was going to be the main functioning entity of the whole, the buildings out there are going to be the main functioning center of the Graduate Research Center of the Southwest, and they were going to get money, this is the key, they were going to get money from all the funding agencies. This fell through. Finally, and again I say this is what has come down to us through vice presidents that faculty have known over the years and from other sources, that the funding agencies were not going to support an entity outside of the academic area.
Mm-hmm.
So what had to happen as funding fell away out there was somebody had to pick up the Graduate Research Center of the Southwest. Who did it? State of Texas.
State of Texas, of course.
It did. Well, and it was, well, I should say questionable. It was not an academic operation, it seems like, from the very beginning. I happen to know of a couple of people who went out there and did all the things they were told to do by the faculty that they had brought in, no doubt, able people. But the people, the young people that I knew that went out there were counting on getting PhDs were treated rather shabbily and didn't get their degrees. And what they said was, no, they wanted us to do some more. They wanted us to do some more. We need to do some more advanced work in this area. Well,
meanwhile, back on the home front,
yes.
Was Flack still dean of the School of Engineering at that point?
No, he was in his last year.
Mm-hmm.
And when he left, well, I knew who was coming. I did not know who was coming in at the time, but a man was appointed, a man named Howard Henry, who was retiring from Westinghouse at the time. And it seemed that he thought that this is where old retirees from industry went, to deanship in universities.
Mm-hmm. This was not uncommon at that time, wasn't it?
It was.
May still
That's
not
right.
be, I don't know.
Oh, it couldn't possibly be. And this is the thing that became another one of the shocks that I got this first year. I went to an American Society for Engineering Education meeting at Purdue. Right away after I came here, but before Howard Henry had come here. And we at Michigan State thought we were pretty much on the cutting edge, you know, that phrase, of where engineering education was going. And we knew that one of these regions was system analysis. And so I said to him at Purdue, I said, Howard, what do you think about the direction system analysis is taking? What? What are you talking about? Essentially, this is what he said. Well, schools of engineering are too competitive to have somebody coming in and saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, nice, pleasant fellow. He came down here.
He did come.
Oh yes, he came. He was already selected by the president.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came, and his position, his feelings were already evident, or were going to be evident immediately to industry, and they were. And so this didn't help us a bit. It didn't help at all. He wasn't able to carry on in 1960s fashion. And it was
That is, he was hostile to our industrial relationships?
Absolutely not. No.
No.
No, he wasn't hostile to them.
The
He
contrary.
just was unable to represent a school of engineering to them. And of course, the faculty here could see that he was a nice guy, very nice.
How long was he dean?
I don't remember how long it was, but I don't think it was more than, not more than 3 or 4 years. Maybe as much, 60 to 63, maybe 3 to 4 years, I'd say.
And then, was it at that time that Tom Martin
Oh
came?
yes, then the sky fell.
How was he selected, incidentally, Lorn? Was the faculty involved in the selection process?
Essentially, no. Essentially not. And I guess if you want me to go ahead from this point, I can say that he was an able man, but he was, well, we had a meeting with the faculty, I would say fairly soon after he came, say in the first, maybe 2 or 3 months. And he came in, nothing was said. And he came in and got out a sheaf of notes. And he began to read them, and he read them to us without stopping. And it involved emasculating these departments and creating new entities in fields that he thought were going to be important. Electronic sciences, systems engineering, computer science, and maybe there was a toss out here to some kind of mechanical engineering entity, and maybe another one over civil engineering. And so he'd already picked out the people. And so he said, this is going to be it. He didn't say it to us at this time, but he said the centers, Electronic Sciences Center is the one that I fell into, were going to have complete authority. They were going to set the curriculum. They were going to put the courses together. They were going to have the research, and the departments could, well, they could grant the degrees. They could say they were going to
They could
provide
certify.
the course. Yeah, they get to certify, and really that's it. And so the meeting ended after about 30 minutes, and he said, well, that's all for today. And so he walked out, walked in his office. I walked out and right in behind him in his office. And I said, Dr. Martin, aren't you going to give the faculty some voice in this new structuring? He said, no. I've been brought here to do a job. And that's it. That was it.
By whom had he been brought, Lorn?
Well, we think by
Was this
industry,
Willis Tate's
local industry.
inspiration?
But was it what?
Was it Willis Tate's inspiration? Or was he strongly influenced by, is Eric Johnson still in the wings at this point?
Oh, yes. By this point, we'd already broken with Eric Johnson. I feel he had, I believe, President Tate, and he just got at cross purposes. Because, as I may have said earlier, forgotten what I said earlier, but we learned from from people at Texas Instruments in places of authority that the whole idea behind the Graduate Research Center of the Southwest was a research entity for Texas Instruments. It was that clear, and we didn't hear that from just one, but we heard it from numbers of people there. And the circumstantial evidence certainly would support that. And what was to happen at SMU seemed to be a come on to get, well, SMU had the idea in the first place. It was SMU's idea to develop a graduate research center. And they were going to be supported, and so they got drawn into this. Now, who knows how that originally arose? But I think I've suggested Todd Albritton part of it. I think there were others. It wasn't that we didn't need it, and the literature is full of implications about how inadequate we were prepared to meet the challenge that was arising in Texas as oil disappeared, as cattle growing went down the drain, as cotton long gone. What was going to happen? And we were in competition with the East and the West Coast, and we were not doing anything constructive about it.
And the aerospace industry and the electronics industries have been born in the wartime and were blossoming.
Yes, yes.
Returning, excuse me, if you want to continue that line, I was going to return to the Tom Martin story and ask maybe for your appraisal, Lorn. I've forgotten how long Tom Martin was here. Certainly he had the reputation outside his own school for the rest of us as an academic entrepreneur, an autocrat, but an ambitious man.
Huckster is a word.
Huckster, as you would. What was his long-term impact on the school, would you think?
Well, I think perhaps, in fairness to him, there were some positive results. He brought some people here who were useful, and some who are still here. Others left, I'd say, one or two within the time he was here to seek better fortunes elsewhere. And I thought that we lost out, though, quite a bit by having broken up the standard entities that comprise a school of engineering over the world, namely electrical, mechanical, civil. Those are the basic ones we had, and then we also
Core
had
fields
industrial
organized as departments within a school. Now that structure returned, of course, after Martin's departure.
Oh yes, it did. In fact, it returned before his departure. He saw that it was not going to work. He had brought in people. Well, one person he brought in had absolutely no experience in academia, none. And I happened to be in his center, and it was not a good relationship there. He wasn't mean, but he wasn't informed. He made a number of serious errors. He brought in people that later caused us a lot of trouble, a couple of Chinese people. One of whom he promised would never seek a professorship, and later she was seeking that, and finally got Tom Martin in trouble because he had given her a commendation as a fine teacher, and so he couldn't back out of it. We had to give her tenure, even though she knew nothing at all about electrical engineering. She was a chemist. So we had difficulties of that kind in the school. But he did bring in the television system, which, and I'm not sure, I think it's still a mixed blessing.
Would you comment on that? It brought many students to the school via the television studio.
We had, SMU had its largest percentage increase in students, and I might say, students and graduate students, in the years shortly after I came, well, they were already, that level of graduate student, was already arising before I came because of the need to have advanced work in engineering and electrical engineering here. So there were already graduate courses of some quality in place, and they were all being taught on the campus. So the fellows from out in area working at the industry had to come here to the campus at night. And so our courses would run for 3 hours at night. That wasn't the easiest and nicest way to do it. Take an hour and a half and give everybody
meeting once a week.
Break, meeting once a week. So it wasn't so bad for the coming. So, and we had an increasing enrollment in that area. So that was good. When he came, this disappeared. He was able to get television programming, you might say, for teaching the students in studios out at various industries in the area. And this begins to pile additional work and time on the individual faculty. It begins to cause questions to be raised about the way in which the courses were being monitored during quizzes. It raises questions about the extra time you have to give to getting papers in, shuffling through them, grading them, getting them sent back to the student, and all this sort of thing, and the delays inherent in that, and the problems for scheduling quizzes and interviews and this sort of thing. So that kind of a program was never really enjoyed, I think, by the faculty because of the enormous amount of additional work.
It was a burden, wasn't it?
And as the man who now runs the National Technological University, I believe it's called, from a place out in Colorado, came through here and tried to sell it, the faculty was not anymore impressed. This nice, interesting comedy in the theater, in the Margot Jones Theater last night, As Bees in Their Honey Drown, talks about people who are trying to do something creative, and in the process they're easily taken in by people who have something to gain and maybe really taken in and taken for money and for reputation and for really loss of dignity. And this was demonstrated wonderfully in this play. I didn't hear all the words. I wish I could. Some of my hearing is gone, but that was so appropriate to this because I see us as having been a part of a situation like this where we need to move along. We need to move up. So we got to market ourselves some way. We got to bring in people who want to who have their own axe to grind, who want to move along, who want to make money, and so an entity such as this, well-meaning, with well-meaning people there, well-meaning board of trustees and all, get taken in. So you see my point.
Yes, Lorn, we'll return to the School of Engineering in a few minutes, but there are other activities in which you've been much involved that I think we ought to talk about. You've been a powerful university citizen for these many years. Among other things, you were associated with the formation of University College.
Yes.
How did all that come about? And what role did you play?
It came about as a part of the carrying out of The so-called master plan, as I understand it, Carter, and here again, I thought, and I think a good many people thought, that if we could put together a master plan, and we hate to use that word because we did it then, we did it 10 years later, and we did something like that 10 years after that.
And we'll do it again.
And we'll do it again. But this seemed to be something that was quite a step up, apparently, for the people here and for the university. And I was elected to the council, the University College Council, that had the job for putting this master plan together, which was approved. We got a master plan approved, and we were going to change courses. Going to have, instead of English, we'd have something we were going to call discourse and literature. And in parallel to that, we were going to have something we called nature of man, which would include some of the Western culture studies that one normally has. And we would have people to, we'd have new book selections, new curricula approved. And then we also were going to have committees and commissions, whatever, to monitor these courses to see that they went well. We did have one good course, at least one good course. Not one that I had responsibility in monitoring or putting together, and I couldn't understand really why they pick a professor of electrical engineering to supervise people in the English department putting together discourse and literature.
Obviously, it
But they
represents
did.
a great deal of confidence.
Anyway, one of the good courses we put together, and I believe that I can say it was a good course because my son came home delighted with it, and that was
Excited about literature, yes.
No, this was a course over in art school, and everyone coming in was required to take part in a creative arts program.
Yes, I remember.
Sculpture, theater,
Yes.
what are the others? Dance, music, and you had to go into one of those courses, and you had to be creative in a sense. And he said, this opened my eyes to what the artist, the faces, and has to do. So at least I think we came out with one good course anyway. He liked it.
The problem that always worried me about University College was drafting faculty whose futures depended upon their building their careers in their own disciplines, drafting them into interdisciplinary courses like the nature of man, for example, which
Yes.
swept across the social sciences, and as to whether or not we could get and keep strong faculties to teach those courses. Did we do so?
I don't think that was ever resolved. We saw Paul Minton leave
Yes.
rather than
Who'd been
even get on the council.
Chair of the Department of Statistics.
Yes, and he made some good, strong recommendations. He left with everybody loving him and really not perceiving the kind of good decision that he was making, not to become a part of this interdisciplinary teaching of courses. I don't think we ever resolved that. I could go into the files here, and there's note after note of people complaining about this and wondering what was going to be done and wondering how, for example, this is not quite in that direction, but how the English department was going to get all the extra people it needed to teach all the extra people it needed to teach discourse and literature or nature of man. And Larry Perrine, whom you knew, was one who said, "I can't get that number of people to teach for a given situation."
That wonderful professor of poetry.
Yes, and Limerick.
And an author of limericks.
Have you read his book?
Lorn, let me change the subject again, because many people will remember your activities on this campus in part as your role as the chief marshal of all of our celebrations and convocations. Were you the first Chief Marshal?
No, I was not. I took over from Charlie Pipes. Remember him
yes,
from
yes,
mathematics?
of course.
And it was a much different operation then, and I don't I don't know how it all came off, because the first few years I was here, we all lined up outside every time. It didn't make any difference. In May, you line up, and you line the people up out along the street, and you hope it won't rain. And then you run them in, and they go down into the gym there, and maybe there'll be a little music. And I think the few times that I was involved with that, we had 2 or 3 pieces of brass for effect, and for a little celebration. And we marched in, sat down relatively freely. I say it that way.
Since that time, Lorn, I think there's wide agreement that our convocations and celebrations have become very beautiful affairs. Among other things, we all now see that the gigantic SMU Seal lighted at both the convocation in the fall and the graduation in the spring.
I had an idea that we ought to have a seal of the university. We have a nice university seal. I thought it ought to be on display. And so I took a number of pictures of the stage as it was usually set up for the commencement, and played with various sizes. I'm not an artist here, but at least I thought it ought to be that the little seal would look right. So it turns out that the one that I thought would look about right in size blew up to, when it was put in real life size, about 6 to 8 feet. And so I talked, and I was going to look up his name, but he's and I haven't done it, and I'm sorry I didn't, but he was in the theater division and responsible for production of the all kinds of props.
Mm-hmm.
Fine fellow. And so we decided that we'd put a backing of maybe 5/8 inch plywood down, and on that we'd put a sizable piece of plastic, about plastic foam. And we did that, and that fella with a routing device routed out what you see there in the seal. Beautifully, beautifully done. Of course, we had to put the pattern down, but he did it nicely, and we decided on the colors. And so that's how we got the seal. And it's been used, and it's a heavy thing, and it's been maltreated on occasion, but in general we still have it and still use it.
It's still a beautiful thing.
Anyway, that we got done. Let me talk about one other thing here. We finally got, well, I got appointed Chief Marshal at a time when Jim Brooks had responsibility in the provost office.
Yes.
And he essentially gave me carte blanche to do what I wanted to do. So we got the physical plant to see that this is a high-level operation. Put the chairs in there and line them up nicely, nice white chairs. Clean up the Coliseum. And let's get everybody in the basement, or let's line up everybody in Moody Coliseum and in what came to be Deadman Center basement.
Mm-hmm.
We used that as soon as it got ready, as soon as there was space down there. So we lined up everybody inside, never had to worry about the rain. And then another family in the theater school, widely known, great reputation, I can't think of the name, Eckert, I think, they produced banners for us. So we had something nice there to delineate the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so as things just grew this way, and then I got Jim Brooks to give us money to have the symphony orchestra down there, the SMU Symphony. And that was nice. That was nice. We had very beautiful music then ahead of the operation and afterward. And finally, I worked closely with Bill Lively in getting the trumpeters to announce the arrival of the faculty in this stage.
Those beautiful
party.
fanfares, yes.
Between him and the conductor of the symphony, and I'm sorry I've forgotten his name, he was here for a few years and then he left. I think he went up to North Texas.
Brussels.
Oh yes. Between Bill and Brussels and myself, we had so much fun planning what we were going to do, you know. And Bill said, you know, why don't we, at the very end, turn down the lights, turn them out, essentially, except for a few around. I said, okay, how about writing then a nice arrangement of Varsity? So it got done. We got the lights turned down.
So the lights fade, the spotlight is on the University Seal.
That's right.
And the symphony plays Varsity.
Yes.
While we all sit in silence.
Yes. Yes.
Or stand in silence, perhaps, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's a moving.
It is a moving time.
Even to
it's
those
become
of us.
obviously a tradition. That's a very beautiful tradition, I think, at SMU.
Well, it's only been possible to carry this off because I've been able to get faculty to serve as marshals and to do what I ask them to do.
Well, you recruited quite an army for each of these events. Lorn, speaking of music, you are a superb pianist, an organist, and you also became the University Carillonneur, where you merged your interest as a musician with your interest as an engineer in making the old bells work.
Well, that's right. I didn't know we had bells here for a while. I came to really love Carillon music at Michigan State. I walked across the campus twice a day, and twice a day the Carillon was played, about 8 in the morning, about 5:30 or 6 in the evening. And the music was just moving, very moving. Came here and I didn't know that a Carillon wasn't played. And finally I did learn at the head of Carillon here. And again, here Jim Brooks comes into the picture. He and I are good friends. I'm sure you know Jim well. Said, Lorn, tell you what, because your musical ability and your engineering ability, why don't you take over responsibility for the Carillon? Repair it, play it, get people to play it, and build a music library. Well, I've done all of those, except about the last time I went up there, the physical plant people who do the actual repair these days said, look, you ought to stop climbing 40 steel ladder rungs to get up here and let us do this. So I put chalk numbers on the bells, and so when there's a bell that isn't functioning, I say, well, F sharp 2 is not working. Will you take care of it? And so they do. But I did the electrical repair on it for a while, in the beginning to get it underway, refurbished the clavier on the 3rd floor of Fondren, and it's working. And the extension of all this is that I've been hoping to make a real Carillon out of it. That is, one that you play with batons that are mechanically connected to the clappers, so that when you hit a baton hard, you get a loud sound, or if you hit it softly.
So the one can get some dynamics
So
out
you
of
can
the bells.
get some musical dynamics out of it. Well, I've had bids on changing this one so it can be done, and it can be done. But more recently, I've had more grandiose plans, and I've been talking to President Turner about doing something about getting a real Carillon on the campus and having it in a standalone tower. He took it up.
Would be a beautiful idea.
He took it up right away. He said, "Oh, that's fine." I said, "Let this be the capstone of your big fundraising operation." Well, and that appealed to him. So I've been working with Tom Berry and Dr. Turner, who has really done a wonderful job for us, it seems. And he said to me after one of the fundraising meetings, said, "I've already asked 2 people if they would fund this." I've given him a big number, over $3.5 million, so we'd have endowment to take care of the Carillon in the future, to hire Carillonneurs, and to really do something nice with the Carillon.
Lorn, that would be a great heritage to leave to SMU if that comes to pass. Because, well, from my point of view, Lorn is at the north end of the campus at 4 o'clock in the afternoons, when you still regularly play the bells. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound wafting over the campus, very much in the setting of a university. It needs to be more centrally located, it would seem to me.
Yes.
So the bells can be heard more clearly on all corners of the campus. Finally, I think our time may get by, and I want you to talk about, Lorn, your own research, which is not necessarily typical of that for an electrical engineer. In particular, your interest in biomedical engineering.
Yeah, so if we have the time, let me go back a little bit on this and talk about what happens to electrical engineers in particular these days, and what happened as the thing that really drives development is, and that is funding. You go in certain directions. Well, before that affect my changes, I was at the University of Illinois, and as a graduate student, I met in a situation which I think is an ideal one for a university, where people in the school itself get together to talk about possibilities. There was a biology student and myself and a physicist skilled in ultrasound and another physicist skilled in infrared. On our own, we chose to meet every Wednesday afternoon in a room we found always vacant in the engineering building at Illinois. As a result of that, we put together some wild ideas about trying to figure out how the mind works by thinking that we could emulate it or simulate it with electric circuits. And we were going to have to start in a very simple way, but we made a proposal to the Naval Research Lab. And they funded us for the enormous sum of $60,000. Well, it was a lot of money then. Mm-hmm. This is 1946, 47. I was an undergraduate still, but I got to, we submitted it, and they funded it, and I got to work on that project, particularly with this man who was adept in ultrasound. So right there was the beginning of research in the use of ultrasound in medicine in this country, as far as I know it. Ultrasound had been used in medicine in Germany for a long time, before the war and so on. And Etha, my wife, did translation for our project for years, lots of German translation. Anyway, we were moving ahead in this area, and I was, of course, employed on the project. But And we were making real progress, and that laboratory that we established there made great progress. And after I left, I was gone, I think after about 4 or 5 years in that. And they were able to focus ultrasound and actually to make a difference in Parkinsonism treatment in one man who used to do electronic work for them, and who got so he couldn't. They applied this, and it got so he could work again and do creditable work for the group.
Remarkable.
So there was a start. The funding for our project stopped about 1961, but I joined another project in which infrared and its effects were very important. We were taking up the infrared, the pressure to progress in infrared techniques from World War II. So I was with this group, and we were concerned with working with thin films that respond very rapidly to infrared. Well, they respond rapidly to heat. But infrared makes them good sensors, and from radiation that isn't visible to the eye. Anyway, so I was in thin films. In 1963, after I'd been here a few years, then I got this lab going in the building behind Caruth Hall, in the packing laboratory. Packing laboratory. Well, shortly I got that increased to a much larger room there, and I carried that on until maybe we're running out of time.
We are running low on time. You brought the first electron microscope to SMU's campus, didn't you?
I did that as a part of the need to be able to say something about the characteristics of these films.
Mm-hmm.
And I checked all over the campus for the quietest place. And we do this with a petri dish full of mercury. And the best place was in the basement of the Science Information Center, where
nothing is disturbed.
Where nothing is, well, it wasn't too far from Airline Road, but it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I carried this on, but I still had basic interest in the physical characteristics of the human. And so I got the Biomedical Engineering program going in 1964.
So you founded a center in Biomedical Engineering in conjunction with Southwestern Medical School.
What happened was we agreed on a program. Mm-hmm. We had no research facilities whatsoever here for it. Mm-hmm. But I got to be good friends with the dean over there, and so we got a good program going, where our people would do research over there, take the courses in engineering from us, and be monitored by people from there and from here too. So it was a good deal, and we carried on somewhat in parallel, actually in parallel with the Thin Films program. The Thin Films program fell away, and I had a student in biomedical engineering who introduced me to Mr. Caruth back in the mid-'80s.
Mm-hmm. And he helped fund that program, didn't he?
And he gave us a lot of seed money for that. And that's what's still in place.
Mr. Caruth remained a great resource for this university until his death. Our time is now at an end, Lorn, but I want to thank you for this conversation. We've been talking with Professor Lorn Howard of the School of Engineering and now the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And I think this has been a valuable contribution to the university archives. Thank you very much for being with us.
Yes.
Thank you,
You're
Lorn.
welcome. You're welcome.